No one is coming. And maybe, right now, when you hear that sentence, you feel something inside you soften and snap awake at the same time. Maybe you went through a season where you believed, if I just try long enough, someone will understand, someone will lift me up, someone will say, let me help you. But life, especially after you've lived through enough seasons, enough rounds of hope followed by disappointment, has a brutally direct way of reminding us. Sometimes, the thing you're waiting for is the thing that never comes. And that doesn't have to be a verdict. It can be a door. This is the terrifying collapse of the social safety blanket illusion. You know, in this era people talk endlessly about connection, community, companionship, but if you've ever truly fallen into a void, you understand. Between warm words and real action, there's a long distance. And it's inside that distance that you begin to see the true nature of expectation and the price of placing your fate in someone else's hands. No one will save you, because every individual, even the ones speaking in loving tones, is governed by the self-interest maximization principle. They won't invest in your vision because it hasn't been proven yet, and they'd rather avoid risk than share glory. They want you to succeed, as long as it doesn't require any sacrifice of their resources. And if you're listening to this and it stings, maybe it's because you've stood there before, standing in front of a closed door, calling someone's name, and getting nothing but silence back. Don't be quick to conclude that you're not worthy. Usually that isn't it. Usually it's just how people operate when they're afraid of losing their share. When you collapse, don't expect a hand to reach for you. Even the closest people around you are unconsciously running a resource preservation strategy. They won't push you when you're exhausted, because it doesn't bring them a direct benefit. And deep down in the unconscious, their shadow may even want you to fail, to confirm their own relative safety, to prove they were right not to take the risk. It sounds cold, but sometimes, it's precisely that coldness that wakes us from a dream we've been sleeping inside for too long. Especially when you've crossed enough decades, you realize an adult isn't someone who never hurts. An adult is someone who can face the truth without letting it destroy them. For 99% of the population, this naked moment of recognition is the beginning of psychological collapse. They break. They scream at the universe through a victim mentality, shouting, "Why me? Why do I have to face this alone?" They feel abandoned, as if the universe owes them some kind of salvation. They cannot tolerate the truth that cosmic fairness is a delusion. If you've ever asked those questions, you're not weak, you're human. But what matters is, how long do you want to stay there? Because there is another fork in the road. Few take it, but everyone who does gets their life changed. Not because life suddenly becomes easier, but because they change the way they stand inside life. But for the remaining uno, the outsiders, the architects, the students of Machiavelli, this isolation is not a tragedy. It is a baptism. This is the moment they shed the old skin of dependency and accept the absolute power of the internal locus of control. They don't ask, "Why me?" They ask, "What do I need to build?" Loneliness isn't punishment. It's the prerequisite for becoming the lord of your own kingdom. And listen, whether you're 25 or 65, whether you're starting over or trying to protect what you've already built, the question, "What do I need to build?" is always the healthiest question. It puts you back in the driver's seat. It helps you stop waiting for someone to show up and legitimize your dream. You're reading these words, not out of curiosity, but because you feel friction. And that friction usually shows up when there's a force inside you that the outside world can't match. As if you carry a different rhythm, a different vision, and your very existence makes other people uncomfortable, not because you've done something wrong, but because you remind them of what they once dreamed of, and then abandoned. That is the burden of an ambition your environment cannot tolerate. You're exhausted from having to explain yourself to people who choose to misunderstand you. This isn't just a difference of opinion. This is psychological resistance. You expose their mediocrity, and their stubborn insistence on misunderstanding you is a psychological defense mechanism of the weak, designed to preserve the illusion of safety and righteousness. There's a very real-life lesson here, especially for anyone who spent years inside a family, a workplace, or a closed community. You can't use explanations to persuade someone who's clinging to fear. You can only live differently, and let results speak. Stop waiting for permission, waiting for support, waiting for a perfect team. That waiting is an invisible chain, designed to keep you in line. And sometimes, that line disguises itself as very kind words. Take it slow. Wait for the right time. Let people see if you can really do it first. But some things, if you keep waiting, you'll wait until your heart goes cold. The idea that you need support to succeed is the greatest lie sold by a society obsessed with interdependence. This is herd mentality at the strategic level, where collective safety is prioritized over individual breakthrough. Machiavelli knew this truth. Allies are temporary tools. Support always comes with conditions, and betrayal is always a risk. You might feel the heaviness of this. But remember one balancing truth. Understanding the mechanism doesn't mean you have to become cold. Understanding the mechanism is so you can set boundaries, place trust in the right places, and stop trading your heart for a fake sense of safety. Comillas. I will prove why having no one beside you is a supreme strategic advantage. A lethality that the supported will never possess. The supported always carry bindings, expectations, and people they must protect. Those are weaknesses. The solitary does not. The solitary has only one thing to conquer. And that is ultimate power. And if these words feel heavy, understand them as a metaphor for will. Not a call to anything extreme. In real life, strength is sometimes simply the ability to get up in the morning, keep a promise to yourself, do the right thing, even when no one applauds. We didn't come here to heal. We are going to perform a cold surgery on your thinking. Accept the harsh truth. If you're still obsessed with recognition, you will be a slave to public opinion forever. We must cut out the part of your soul that craves validation from the outside, a primitive need built on a deep evolutionary fear of being expelled from the tribe. That need is a psychological vulnerability the powerful constantly exploit. We must kill the herd animal inside you. And sometimes, kill here simply means, you stop letting the crowd's emotions decide your heartbeat. You stop letting a careless glance ruin your entire day. You stop pricing your life in applause. This thing people call relationships, or having someone back you, is not a foundation. It's a psychological toxin. The moment you decide to lean on people, you sign a sentence. You are admitting your own fundamental powerlessness. This is the act of handing over the key to your destiny. And you know the saddest part? Many people don't even realize they've handed it over. They think they're just needing a little help, but a little, then a little more, until their sense of self becomes dependent on other people's eyes. People act based on their core interests, not yours. When you need them, you activate their leverage effect. Their help isn't generosity. It's an investment in controlling you later. When you seek help, you're not seeking a gift. You are actively seeking debt. This isn't just a financial transaction. This is the creation of a power gap. And here, let me pause. Like a radio storyteller would, to ask you something very real. In your life, how many times have you accepted help, and then felt you had to live differently to repay it? Not with money, but with silence, with swallowing your words, with not daring to say what you think. If you've lived that, you're not alone. And if you want, leave a comment. I have. Just 3 words. Sometimes saying it out loud is the first step in untying a knot that's been cinched for too long. Think carefully about 3 forms of psychological debt. 1. When someone helps you overcome an obstacle, you owe them. This debt isn't paid with money. It's paid with loyalty, silence or obedience when they demand it. 2. When someone invests in you, they own a piece of your ambition. They gain the right to interfere, control, and command, turning your success into a tool that increases their influence. 3. Emotional support. The most dangerous debt. You've handed them the terrifying power to withdraw that support. Weaponize your vulnerability into emotional manipulation to maintain your compliance. You search for a safety net to reduce the risk of failure. But through the lens of ultimate power, that safety net is only a sophisticated spiderweb. Yes, it keeps you from falling. But its ultimate purpose is to trap you and lock you into service. And from here, we naturally move to something even more important. If you can see the spiderweb, you are no longer unconscious. Awakening doesn't always feel pleasant. But it brings freedom. You are burning precious mental capital, constantly scanning the horizon for a savior. Seeking support doesn't just waste time. It contaminates your core vision. Unconsciously you dilute your ideas, trim your ambition to please the crowd. You're asking for confirmation before the performance is even over. And that's a very human habit. Especially in a society where everyone is pushed to prove, explain, display results. But sometimes what you need most isn't another cheerleader. What you need most is to stop asking permission. You must accept the 0 point. This isn't only material lack. This is absolute psychological and resource isolation. Most of humanity panics at this threshold. They fear the primal fear of ostracism. But for you, the outlier, the 0 point is not the end. It is ultimate freedom. If no one supports you, you have no master. You escape psychological debt, the silent cost of all help. Every outstretched hand is a potential chain. By accepting self-sufficiency, you strip others of every lever they could use to manipulate you. And here, in the middle of this, we need a lesson rooted in real life. Self-sufficiency doesn't mean you shut people out. It means you choose relationships from a place of autonomy. You can love, you can help, you can build community. But you don't trade away your decision-making power just to feel like you belong. A strong community is a community of people who can stand, not people who cling. Anger is cleaner fuel. You must tell yourself a villain origin story. Let contempt activate you. This is the shift from begging for approval to craving power and dominance. Take every rejection, every unanswered message, every smirk, every doubt, and throw it into a mental forge. Anger is a cleaner fuel than sadness. Sadness is passive. It invites learned helplessness. anger is activated. It pumps adrenaline, sharpens focus, creates immediate motion. It's the fuel of action, the purest Machiavellian energy, using the pain of contempt to reach absolute strength. If you've lived through enough years, you know this. Emotions aren't bad. They just need transmutation. Not so you become bitter toward life, but so you stop being bitter toward yourself. You can turn disappointment into drive to do better, live kinder, build more discipline, and use your experience to live others the right way, without controlling them, without demanding that, simply by being a mirror. You must enter the ghost phase. When you have no audience, you don't need to perform. Most people fail because they talk away all their energy. When you talk about your goals, you get a tiny dose of dopamine. The brain gets tricked into thinking you've already achieved them. This is goal substitution. A ghost doesn't speak. You must swear absolute silence about your ambitions. Silence isn't emptiness. It's containment. Silence creates pressure. When you carry a massive goal inside you, but refuse to release it through words, the energy builds in your system. This is the boiler effect. That pressure is what drives you to work at 2 de la mañana. Pressure is real currency. And if you're at an age where sleep isn't as deep as it used to be, you know 2 de la mañana is a true image. There are nights we're awake not to prove anything to anyone, but because inside us there's a promise we haven't kept to ourselves. And sometimes keeping that promise, quietly, is a form of dignity. Self-construction, the cruelty of command. To succeed in solitude, you must perform the ultimate act of power. Becoming the architect of yourself. You must kill the dependent, so the sovereign can rise. To complete this work, you must create a strategic split in personality. 1. The weak one, tired, emotional, the voice of comfort. It wants more sleep, wants to avoid, wants to blame. 2. The commander, sharp, unemotional, goal-locked. An ego designed to control and conquer. The commander must drag the weak one through the mud of resistance, regardless of begging and tears. You must speak to yourself. Stop crying. No one cares about your feelings. Everyone is busy with their own pain. No one cares of begging care's effect. You must be ruthless with yourself, in the short term, to secure power in the long term. You refuse comfort, instant gratification, so you can take control and rule tomorrow. And if that cold tone doesn't fit you, you don't have to copy it, word for word. Keep the spirit. Discipline is a mature form of love. Discipline isn't to make you suffer. Discipline is so you don't have to live in regret. Comfort is the enemy of greatness, because it works like a thick cushion that keeps you from feeling the hard impact of your own laziness. If you have zero support, you have no one to serve as a guard that blocks pain. The feedback loop becomes immediate and brutal. The punishment is an empty stomach, the painful awareness that you are the only one responsible for this failure. This is visceral conditioning. When you're alone, every mistake leaves a bruise. And it's inside those bruises that growth begins. You're forced to adapt. You're forced into shadow confrontation, the part of you that's weak, cowardly, the part you've always denied in front of others. You don't just become resilient, you become anti-fragile. You absorb chaos, and use its energy, to restructure yourself into something stronger. No support equals maximum education. You are forced to become a polymath, you become a weapon of mass competence. The person who built an entire castle from zero, the one who understands architecture, materials, defense, that person is irreplaceable. And here, we also need to pull the story toward building community, the way you want. Someone who built it alone often understands the value of kindness done correctly. They don't give to create that. They share so others can stand too. If you've ever lacked, you're even more capable of creating real safety. Not an illusion, but responsible presence. Listening, respecting, and not controlling. Never confuse kindness with harmlessness. You can't succeed with no support if you're harmless. Harmlessness makes you predictable, controllable, and eventually prey. You need strategic aggression. You need the ability to look at competitors, not with respect, but with the hunger to crush them. You need extreme pride to believe you deserve more than the crumbs society tosses at you. Don't just want it, demand it. This is where you must integrate your shadow. Stop feeling guilty about your ambition. Don't feel ashamed for wanting to be wealthy, wanting to accumulate power, or wanting to prove that everyone who doubted you was wrong. That isn't evil. That is compressed potential energy. Spite is the most loyal fuel. Pride is eternal. They are the ego's loss aversion. The ego can't endure the feeling of failure. Can't accept that other people were right to underestimate you. You can't fail. Because if you stop, the ones who doubted you win. It's dirty fuel, yes. But it burns hot, bright and steady. And again, let me place a safety frame around these strong images. What's precious isn't demanding by hurting anyone. It's demanding by raising your own standard of living. You choose dignity. You choose honest and steady work. You choose not to bow to ignorant judgment. That is power that harms no one, and still changes your life. You've won. You've become a resource, the center of a new psychological gravity. And so they'll come back. The people who were too busy for you will appear. They'll smile, look at you with sparkling eyes, and then say the words that make your stomach tighten with disgust. I always knew we could do it. Comillas punto. They're trying to rewrite history. They're trying to insert us into your story. A blatant psychological theft. This is your final test. If you accept this validation, you hand the key back to them. You must handle this with Machiavellian grace. True revenge isn't rudeness, it's distance. You answer them with polite, cold indifference. Exactly the way they treated you when you were still struggling in the dark. You must become a wall of glass. They can see your success, but they can't touch it. Their love is conditional. It's built on your utility to them. But you can't build your kingdom on the shifting sand of external validation. You applauded yourself when the room was completely silent. And that applause, the sound of self-approval, the affirmation rising from the deepest part of your will. That is the only sound that truly matters and endures. That is the foundation of sovereignty. And here near the end, we need a lesson that's very real and very useful for community. When you're standing strong, you can become the one who comes for someone else, in a clean and healthy way. Not to save them, but to remind them they can stand up too. A check-in call. A simple message. Listening without judgment. Those things don't create debt, if you do them with respect. And without demanding anything back. And sometimes, society gets better from small things like that. I can feel the resistance happening in your prefrontal cortex. I can feel the cognitive dissonance screaming. That isn't conscience. That's basic biology. That's prey instinct trying to pull you back into the herd where it feels risk is spread out. The path with no support requires you to be willing to be seen as a failure, an object of pity, for a long, painful stretch of time. You are performing strategic metacognition on the price of power. You realize that the empty chair beside you, the absence of cheap cheers, the silence of the solo journey. This isn't a deficit, it's a vacuum of power. It's a supreme throne waiting for you to grow big enough, dangerous enough, to fill it with the cold presence of your own being. Power demands absolute, calculated solitude. And if you're listening with a heart that's been through many storms, you understand that throne doesn't always live in fame or money. Sometimes it's the peace of not having to prove yourself anymore. Sometimes it's looking into the mirror and saying, I didn't abandon myself. Comillas. If everything above has shaken the foundations of your perception, understand that this is only filtered fragments, what I can expose publicly without punishment. The raw truth of dark psychology is never allowed to circulate freely. The system protects the comfort of the majority. You are not like the others, those who are afraid to face their own shadow. Step into the darkness where the light of truth is found. And before you turn off this video, I want to leave you with one last reminder. Gentle but real. No one is coming isn't meant to make you despair. It's meant to set you free. When you stop waiting for someone, you begin becoming someone you can rely on. And when you become that person, you don't just change your own life. You can also help make someone else's life less lonely, in a clean way, without conditions, without chains. If you want, leave a comment. Are you at the 0 point, or are you stepping into the ghost phase? I'll read it. And maybe another stranger will read it too. And they'll see that, at least in this moment, they aren't the only one trying to stay standing.